Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to be here with all of you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm here right now. No, Sarah, it has not been canceled. It has not been canceled. I'm right here. Just was a little late getting to start. Was listening to RFK on the Jimmy Dore show, and that stuff's wild. But anyway, folks, I got to do my own program tonight. I heard RFK defending Israel on the Jimmy Dore show. Guess I could have kept listening to that, but I thought, I got my own program here to do. So, yeah, here we are. Here is our stream. We are ready to roll. So, yeah, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, and away we go.
Of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, 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 everybody. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. Glad you're here. It is July 31st. I am here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment, and we are once again having yet another late night, not so late, a little bit earlier than usual conversation. We're here. We're live on different platforms tonight, and should be a good show. Should be a good program. Yet another late night program. So I want to remind people of a couple things before we get going, before we start talking about what we're going to talk about and all of that. Quick reminder that coming up on Sunday, next Sunday, will be the Humanity for Peace rally. And that's coming up. That'll be on Sunday, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. It'll be at the United Nations in New York City. It'll be at in Chicago. It'll be in Portland, Oregon. It'll be around the country. There's going to be protests, Humanity for Peace. That's going to be happening around the country. It's on the anniversary of Hiroshima. The rally is saying no to nuclear war, peace with Russia, peace with China. It's going to be a very important demonstration. Garland Nixon is going to be there. Scott Ritter is going to be there. A lot of people are going to be there. We at the Center for Political Innovation, we are going to be out in full force for the demonstration. It's going to be very important. So I hope that people will be there at Humanity for Peace. People's Party endorses, Libertarian Party endorses, etc. That's coming up. That's going to be important. Also, I want to remind you all to go to the Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel every morning, because every morning we have morning messages from members of the Center for Political Innovation, friends and allies of the Center for Political Innovation. It's a great way to start the day, and we have had 15 of them so far. I've got another one. And, if you are an ally and a friend of the CPI and you want to record a Center for Political Innovation morning message, go ahead and send me one. We could always use more messages. I had a fan send me one just today. Someone, I guess he came to an event I did one time. He's been watching the YouTube channel. He's not in a position to join because of life circumstances, but he wanted to make a greeting for the channel. I watched it. It was tremendous, and it's uploaded to go for tomorrow. And we've got other messages from other prominent individuals coming in. They're working on it. And this is really, really a great way to start your day. So I urge people to go and subscribe to the Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel and start your day with a message from the CPI. We try to let people start their day with revolutionary hope and enthusiasm. That's a great way to start your day. I also wanted to let people know that tomorrow is the 1st of August, and it is also the day that I will be doing a patrons only stream. A patrons only stream for only patrons. Only patrons will be able to join this upcoming stream. So if you are a fan of what we do here and you want to have close, intimate access to me, you want me to be able to hear from me and have me just answer your questions and speak directly. I don't come with opening remarks. There's no super chatting that goes on. It's just a small, intimate conversation with me. Sign up today on the Patreon, right? You have to sign up before midnight tonight if you want to be on the Patreon August 1st. And on August 1st, I will be having a patrons only stream. So go ahead and sign up. I'm going to try to do a lot more of those, because we need to do them. So I wanted to remind people about my Patreon. You can do that if you want to be engaged with the show in that way. I see we have a super chat that just came in. The Spiritor team compare what Ukraine did in Moscow to Operation Doolittle from World War II. Okay. So yeah, folks. I know there's a lot of people that are watching RFK. RFK seems to be increasingly popular in our circles, but the issue that he was talking about a little bit ago on Jimmy Dore, the issue of Israel, is where there's a lot of disagreement in our circles with him. I was listening to that as well. That's why I was delayed starting. I couldn't quite believe what I was hearing, but RFK is an interesting candidate from many different angles, and a lot of what he says is really great, but some of what he says on Israel, for example, is really awful. So, we don't endorse any political candidate. And, I had my own stream scheduled. I was a few minutes late, but that's okay because we're starting and we have an important message for folks. So welcome, everybody. I'm glad that you all are here. We're going to have our live stream. Now, the way we do this, right, and we are streaming right now on Rumble, we are on Rockfin, and we are on YouTube. And the way we do this, is I give my opening remarks, which is just what I feel like talking about, whatever it is I feel like talking about, whatever is on my mind tonight, I give my opening remarks. And while I give my opening remarks, I am writing your questions down. If there are questions that come in via Rumble Rants, I will write them down and do them. If there are questions that come in via tips on Rockfin, I will write them down. And if there are questions that come in as super chats, like this one just did, I will write them down and I will do them. That's the way it works. That's the way this show works, is I answer people's super chat questions or Rumble Rant questions or Rockfin questions in the second half of our program. Now, my preference, if you want to send a question in, is to send me a Rumble Rant because more of it goes to me and less of it goes to the company, the platform, right? Rumble takes a lot less. So Rumble Rants are the best way to send a question, but I take them via Super Chat on YouTube. I take them via Rockfin as well. So there you go, folks. So the way this works, like I said, opening remarks, roll call where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. And then after that, in the third section of our show, I answer questions for the rest of the night. That's the way the second half of the show works. So it's all on you. If you send super chats, questions, you send them in, and you ask me good questions and get me going, then the second half of our show can be productive. Glad you all are here tonight. It's been a long month in July. We had our CPI event in New York City at the beginning of the month, which was a lot of work. And, we had protests, and then we had that event. And Peter Coffin is making his great documentary about our recent event. We started doing the morning messages, which I think have been a tremendous success. I'm working on a new short book that I'm just coming right along on. It's going to be a surprise to some people, but I think it's definitely worth writing. I've done the research by far, years of research. It's been in me for years. It's just been about time for me to write it. So I'm writing a short book right now. I was working on it today. It felt good to work on it today. I had a lot to say on the topic, and I'm working from home. My days are pretty dull. I cover UN meetings. I will say this morning I did a great chat with Sophia. Sophia is in Virginia. She does Small Town Voice on YouTube, but she's all over Chinese social media. We did a chat that she divided up into different segments, and I'm going to be posting it here on this YouTube channel. I'm going to be posting it, and she's great. And she updated us on news from China, events from China. She asked me for my commentary. It's kind of a back and forth. It was very awesome. Sophia is very, very cool. And she's very large on Chinese social media, a lot of followers on the Chinese social media, talking about what the United States is really like, things like that. So it's really great to engage with her. So I'm going to jump into my opening remarks at this point. And then from there, I'll be answering super chat questions after the roll call. So there we go. So folks, I saw this clip, this clip that recently went viral, and it gave me something to talk about. I don't know if you've seen this, but this is Senator Dianne Feinstein of California. This is Senator Dianne Feinstein.
A quorum. We will now vote to report the Defense Appropriations Bill favorably, subject to amendment. The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Feinstein.
Say aye.
Pardon me?
Aye.
Yeah.
Just say
I would like to support a yes vote on this. It provides $823 billion. That's an increase of $26 billion for the Department of Defense. And it funds priorities submitted.
Yeah, just say aye.
Okay, just
Great.
aye.
Thank you.
Senator Durbin, Senator Reed.
Yeah. She doesn't know where she is. She doesn't know what she's doing. They're telling her, just say aye, just say aye. It's a yes or no vote, a yay or nay vote. Just say aye, just say aye. And she doesn't know where she's at. But that got me thinking about San Francisco politics. She's from San Francisco. She's a U.S. Senator from California. And that clip got me thinking about San Francisco politics, because if you found out how it was that Dianne Feinstein became the mayor of San Francisco, yeah, I mean, if you actually knew the details, many people do not know the details about how Dianne Feinstein became the mayor of San Francisco. And I thought it would be worth talking about it. I have not been to the Bay Area very much. I've only been out to the Bay Area a couple times. You go to Oakland, California, you go to Berkeley, you go to San Francisco, you go to Palo Alto, it's an interesting place. It's kind of a center of power for the Democratic Party. And there's a story here. And, in my book, my recent book, Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and Becoming Revolution, I talk some about this. I have a timeline of events from 1978 to 1981. And in that timeline, I do include the events that led, the final lead up to her becoming the mayor of San Francisco. But I figured that I should just kind of give a little bit of a history of the Bay Area in those years leading up to how Dianne Feinstein got where she is. Because the more you look at the story, the more shady and weird it is, the more apparent it is that the Democratic Party is a very corrupt institution. The more apparent it is that CIA interference in American politics is everywhere, the more apparent it is that our political system and the way Americans think about politics has become very corrupted and confused. The San Francisco Bay Area was very pivotal in the events of the 1960s political upsurge, the 1970s, and ultimately the rise of Dianne Feinstein. And I'm going to talk about those events quickly, right? So in the Bay Area, you've got UC Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley. UC Berkeley is very famous. It's a very prestigious school in California, public university. It's hard to get into, very competitive public university in California, UC Berkeley. In the early 60s, UC Berkeley had a policy that they would not allow students to hand out literature or protest about off-campus issues. That was just a policy they had because they didn't want there to be unrest. McCarthyism had been going. There was a lot of, allegations that they were hiring communist professors. And so the university had this policy that you couldn't leaflet, hand out literature, or have a literature table, or organize or on the campus about off-campus issues. And at the time, the civil rights movement was a really big deal around the country. People were, getting arrested around the civil rights issue. You had Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. leading his protests in the South. You had a lot of young white people going down to Mississippi. Mississippi Freedom Summer was a really big thing. You had a lot of people that were young and were getting involved. McCarthyism had faded. JFK was president. And so at UC Berkeley, there were a number of students who wanted to start organizing around the issue of civil rights on the campus. And they were not allowed to do so under the rules of UC Berkeley. The University of California, Berkeley didn't allow it. So the students began protesting. And they began protesting around this issue. One of the famous incidents was that there was a civil rights literature table that was set up, and the police came and arrested one of the students who was doing it. And so thousands of students surrounded the police car and wouldn't let the police car drive away. They set up on top of the police car microphones, and they turned the police car into like a stage for a mini rally. And hundreds of students gathered around the police car and listened to speech after speech. And they held the police car for like 2 days. They held this police car hostage as the students got up and spoke and agitated, around whatever issue they wanted. It was called the free speech movement. It was early 1960s, and you had various student organizations, one after another, getting up on top of the police car and giving a speech into the microphones they had set up on top of the police car as the police officer was in the police car, and the guy he was arresting was in the police car as well. And the crowd of students were gathered around. They wouldn't let it leave. It's a very, very famous incident. Let me see if I can find you a picture of it. Right, very famous incident. The free speech movement at Berkeley, 1963, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I'll show it to you. Here we go. Here's a photo of it. It was very famous, right? Very famous incident, where the students gathered around the police car, wouldn't let the police car leave, and were one by one getting on top of the police car and giving speeches. It was kind of an iconic incident. Now, the individual who is pictured on top of the police car, that's a guy named Mario Savio. And Mario Savio, an Italian-American student, he was kind of the face of the free speech movement at Berkeley, at UC Berkeley. The students protested. They occupied buildings. They seized police cars like that one. This movement called the free speech movement was kind of an iconic moment in the protest movement, the college radicalism of the 1960s, and it was in the Bay Area. And they eventually got what they wanted. At one point, the university backed down and it said, well, you can organize around off-campus issues. You're just not allowed to organize, to advocate anything illegal. And they said, well, what about civil disobedience, right? Because civil disobedience is illegal, right? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., when he was occupying lunch counters, that was illegal. And so, eventually they did get their way, and the university did back down, and they got the freedom to organize around off-campus issues. And that was the free speech movement at UC Berkeley, which was kind of the very beginning of the Bay Area being a very radical place, a left-wing place during these years. Bob Avakian of the Revolutionary Communist Party. He was from Berkeley. His father was a judge in Berkeley who served on the California State Supreme Court. And he was one of the people who got up and spoke on the microphone. He was a prominent student from Berkeley, from a wealthy family. Father was a judge. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of the International Socialist Organization, the ISO. Well, they started as the Independent Socialist Club at Berkeley, one of the clubs that was trying to get the right to organize on campus. They were followers of Max Shachtman. They were the Trotskyite club at Berkeley, the Independent Socialist Club, and that's what eventually gave birth to what used to call itself the International Socialist Organization. So that was kind of the beginning. But there was also something else happening in the Bay Area, right? And this is very interesting, right? Many people have heard about Project MK Ultra. Ever heard of Project MK Ultra? Well, this was the CIA's mind control program that started in the early 1950s and kept going up into the mid-70s. And it was the U.S. Central Intelligence Program trying to figure out how to control people's minds. And a lot of the research they did involved LSD, lysergic acid dilithiumide, a hallucinogenic drug was synthetically created by Albert Hofmann, a Swiss chemist in the 1930s. And during the 1950s, the CIA started giving it to prisoners to see what would happen and giving it to people. Well, the Bay Area was ground zero for a number of LSD experiments done by the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency. Fascinating. Very, very fascinating stuff that, again, no one ever talks about. And if you bring it up, they call it a conspiracy theory. But it's not a conspiracy theory. Go and read The Poisoner in Chief by Stephen Kinzer. Go and read The Search for the Manchurian Candidate by John D. Marks. All of this stuff is public record. MK Ultra is not a secret anymore. But the Bay Area, in particular, an area called Haight-Ashbury, the CIA in San Francisco went around giving people drugs, giving people hallucinogens. And one of the particular operations they did in the Bay Area was called Operation Midnight Climax. And they wanted to see what the impact of giving hallucinogens to people would be. And so one thing they did is they just blitzed an area. They sent CIA guys into a neighborhood and to just give drugs to everyone in the neighborhood, right? And then watch and see what had happened, right? So they went into restaurants and dropped LSD into everyone's drink. They walked up to people on the beach and gave them, sugar cubes with LSD on them. They just went all over a certain little area, like a couple blocks, and just saturated it with LSD. And they were hoping to see if LSD had military value. They were thinking that if they were to attack the Soviet Union or attack China, they could disperse a bunch of LSD and cause everyone to start hallucinating, and then they could invade and take over, right? And so they were trying to find out the military value of LSD. Another thing that they did is they went to a brothel. They had prostitutes lure men back to a brothel, and when they got there, they chained them to the bed and gave them LSD to see, what would happen. And they wouldn't let them leave, chained them to the bed, and had them trip and wrote down what they did. And that San Francisco Bay Area was kind of ground zero. It was like the center of the LSD experiments, that Operation Midnight Climax, that was a big part of the Project MK Ultra. Now, we know that the Stanford Research Institute out of Stanford University, that was a big part of the liberal CIA. that they were operating there, and that Stanford Research Institute, California, that is kind of a center of the liberal wing of the CIA. Now, there's another wing of the CIA that's associated with South Bend, Indiana, Notre Dame University, Chicagoland, and they tend to be more conservative. But the liberal CIA that brought us Silicon Valley, and we'll get to that later, the liberal CIA was very much a California-based operation. So as you had kind of an upsurge of young people getting interested in civil rights, getting interested in eventually protesting the Vietnam War, you also had the CIA doing its research into LSD and mind control in that area as well. Eventually, the project went national. The CIA was doing research with LSD all over the country. Eventually, a guy named Dr. Timothy Leary, who taught at Harvard University, he was a psychology professor of Irish heritage, taught at Harvard University. And Dr. Timothy Leary, he was given LSD and he loved it. And he eventually left his job. I think he was fired from his job at Harvard to become the acid guru. And they showed him on national television, and he toured the country speaking at college campuses, promoting the use of LSD. And people, he started a religion basically called the League of Spiritual Discovery. And people, it was the acid cult, basically. It was a group of people who believed that LSD had religious and spiritual qualities. And thanks to the efforts of Dr. Timothy Leary, and we now know, thanks to the efforts of the US CIA, LSD was just everywhere, was saturating the country during these years, and was being promoted as some kind of new religious experience, some kind of new religious, thing. Berkeley, Haight-Ashbury was kind of ground zero for that. And, there's books about this. You can read the electric Kool-Aid acid test by, was it Tom Wolfe? He talked about this and the origins of LSD and how the LSD cult has origins with the American government. And this is all now public information. But San Francisco was the center of all of that. Now, we also know that in Oakland, California, which is an African-American area, a lower income suburb of San Francisco, that's where there were two black activists, two black communists named Bobby Seale and Huey Newton, who were friends with each other. And Bobby Seale and Huey Newton, they were friends with each other. I believe Bobby Seale was studying aeronautical engineering. Huey Newton had a background in philosophy. I think Huey Newton had been imprisoned at one point. He had done prison time, but he had a level of education. And Bobby Seale was an aeronautical engineer, he worked in aviation engineering or something like that. And the two of them were friends, and they wanted to advance the interests of the black community. They got really interested in communism, and both of them were affiliated with something that was called the Revolutionary Action Movement, RAM. And RAM was kind of an underground secret communist organization that had been formed. The Communist Party of the United States, 1957, they said that black people are not a nation. They do not constitute a nation. They also embraced Khrushchev's denunciation of Stalin. They kind of functioned as a very reformist Democratic Party organization. So at the time, one of the big activist civil rights groups was called the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or people knew it as SNCC, SNCC. And in SNCC, you had, a very charismatic individual, Stokely Carmichael, who was later known as Kwame Ture. He's the man who coined the term Black Power. And the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee promoted the slogan of Black Power, and it became much more nationalistic and critical of the nonviolent methods that the civil rights movement was using, much more sympathetic, closer to Malcolm X's politics than to the politics of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And so as a result of that, in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, a number of the younger members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee had been part of the Young Communist League of the Communist Party USA. But they didn't like that the Communist Party USA was aligning itself with the Soviet Union against China. They didn't like that the Communist Party USA was advocating voting for the Democrats and was critical of direct action protests. And so many of the younger members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee formed a secret organization called the Revolutionary Action Movement, RAM. And the Revolutionary Action Movement, they promoted the broadcasts of Robert F. Williams. Robert F. Williams was a leader of the NAACP in Monroe, North Carolina, who had taken up arms to fight the Ku Klux Klan. He had fled the United States. He'd gone to China and met with Mao, and then he went to Cuba. And from Cuba, he was broadcasting Black revolutionary messages from Cuba. And the broadcasts were called Radio Free Dixie. And the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, this underground organization called the Revolutionary Action Movement, it was like a secret communist group within the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, they were promoting the ideas of Robert F. Williams. And Robert F. Williams had promoted that Black people should arm themselves against the Klan, against the right wing. They should arm themselves for self-defense. And RAM, they sought to be kind of an underground organization that would encourage Black people to arm themselves and learn to carry firearms to fight against racism. That was their idea. Now, eventually, the Revolutionary Action Movement, it didn't seem to be going anywhere. There was divisions within it. So Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, both of them living in Oakland, California, had the idea that they would start doing armed patrols and follow the police of San Francisco around with shotguns and law books as a way, and tape recorders as a way to challenge police brutality. And they would follow the police, these armed patrols. It was legal to carry a firearm on the street as long as you didn't point it at anybody at that point. And they had law books with them, and they had tape recorders with them and shotguns, and they did these armed patrols where they followed around the police and challenged the police on the street. And that was a really big deal. And it was so much of a big deal that the state of California sought to pass a law to make it illegal. And Ronald Reagan was the governor, and he was supporting it. And there was going to be a law forbidding people from following police officers around with firearms. They were going to pass some gun control legislation. And Ronald Reagan was a big supporter of it because the Black people had guns and etc. Well, when they were planning to discuss this legislation to outlaw following the police around with firearms, the leaders of the Black Panther Party went to the State House in California with their firearms, which was legal at the time. It was legal to carry a firearm on State House grounds. And so they went to the State House and walked into the State House with their guns, wearing their Black Panther uniforms, created a huge media buzz. And the Black Panther Party was very much born in the Bay Area. Another aspect of the Bay Area during this time was something called Ramparts Magazine. Ramparts Magazine. This was an independent magazine that existed in the Bay Area. It was originally aimed at Roman Catholics and was kind of liberal. But Ramparts Magazine suddenly became the voice of radical left-wing politics. Starting in the early 60s, Ramparts Magazine had a lot of funding, and it became the voice of people supporting the Black Panthers, people supporting the anti-Vietnam War protest movement, people supporting the free speech movement at Berkeley, etc. And Ramparts Magazine blew up to be this magazine in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco area, that was wildly popular. And the FBI believed it was getting Chinese or Soviet funding. They could never prove that. They could never prove it was getting funding from another government. But they believed, to some degree, they suspected that the Chinese government was somehow funding it, or the Soviet government was somehow funding it. They suspected there was some kind of foreign funding involved because it put out a very anti-imperialist message supporting the Vietnamese, supporting the Mao and the Chinese Communist Party, having articles about communism, promoting all the protest movements. And Ramparts Magazine was everywhere in the Bay Area, and it was a very radical publication. And what's interesting is I believe one of the prominent editors of Ramparts Magazine was a guy named David Horowitz. who years later became a prominent neoconservative. He's now a big, well-known conservative commentator, but he goes back to his parents were in the Communist Party of the United States, and David Horowitz was heavily involved in Ramparts magazine. He was just this guy on the board of Ramparts magazine. Ramparts magazine made Eldridge Cleaver famous. Eldridge Cleaver was a prisoner in California. He'd been imprisoned for rape, and he had raped white women, and he'd argued that, and that he was doing that. He saw that as a crime against white men. And he started writing articles for Ramparts magazine about the experience of being a black man in America and radical politics. And Ramparts magazine made Eldridge Cleaver famous. The essays that eventually became a book called Soul on Ice were originally published in Ramparts magazine. And eventually Eldridge Cleaver was released from prison, and he went on to become a prominent leader of the Black Panther Party himself. All of this was happening in the Bay Area, and this shows how important the Bay Area, San Francisco, was. The conservatives back in these days, they used to talk about the left coast, referring to the West Coast because it was associated with radical politics. What was interesting is that Ronald Reagan was the governor of California in those years, and he, was very conservative. And Ronald Reagan, there's a lot of kind of old money in Southern California. A lot of, big plantations that grow grapes that are owned by wealthy people. And, Richard Nixon is also from California. And that Ronald Reagan was the governor of California. And he kind of went to war with the student radicals at Berkeley, with the Black Panthers. And that kind of became Ronald Reagan's, reputation as a conservative. He was the very conservative governor who had been involved in McCarthyism during the 1950s. He was a Hollywood actor who'd been a McCarthyist and then become like a conservative political commentator. Ronald Reagan, became the governor of California, and he fought against the student radicals. And that was kind of the basis of his reputation. And this is all happening in the Bay Area, San Francisco. And the Bay Area became known as a center of hippie counterculture. It became known as a center of black radicalism. The Black Panther Party originated there. Eventually, the Black Panthers had a high school that they set up there, a school that they sent kids to, that they ran like a private school that they ran in the Bay Area in Oakland. The Bay Area was kind of the center of radicalism from these years. Now, a lot of wild things happened as the political crisis escalated. At one point in Berkeley, there was a park. There was a piece of land that the university was going to build something on top of. I forget what it was. Like they were going to build a gym there or something. And the counterculture folks declared it to be People's Park. They declared it to be People's Park. And they occupied it, and they refused to let the university build land there. And there was fighting that went on for months as the university students went out and occupied. They turned it into like a community center, into like a park, the People's Park. The National Guard was sent in to fight the students, the People's Park Rebellion. There was even someone who was killed in the rioting around People's Park. There was a guy named James Rector, who was shot, by the National Guard during those protests and killed. Someone was killed in the People's Park rebellion, right? And that there was a lot of fighting in Berkeley during those years. There had been, the famous Watts riots that had happened. I think, that was in Los Angeles, that was in Southern California, but that had set the atmosphere. There'd been a big episode of rioting in the early 60s. And that there was a lot of this stuff happening, right? Now, as the political crisis in the country overall matured, the Bay Area got interesting. Now, there's all kinds of things I could talk about in regards to the Bay Area in these years, right? But as we get into the 1970s, I see someone in the chat mentioned Patty Hearst, right? That whole incident is worth discussing, right? So there was a woman named Patty Hearst, and she was the heiress of William Randolph Hearst. William Randolph Hearst was a very right-wing, anti-communist newspaper tycoon from the 1930s. The Hearst Press, they used to refer to, was known for its vicious anti-communist right-wing writing, the Hearst Press. And his daughter, she was studying at one of the colleges in the Bay Area, and a group of radicals kidnapped her. The group of radicals called themselves the Symbionese Liberation Army, the SLA. The Symbionese Liberation Army, they were called, and they kidnapped the daughter of Patty Hearst. Now, who was the Symbionese Liberation Army? This is very weird. The Symbionese Liberation Army, it started out that some Maoists that were organized into a communist group called Venceremos, they wanted to go recruit prisoners. And so they were going to the jails in San Francisco. They had open visitations. Open visitations in the jails at this time, and often like religious missionaries would go to the jail and try to recruit people and such. And the communists would go to the jail, open visitation, and try to convince the prisoners to become communists, try to recruit the prisoners to communism. Well, there was a prisoner by the name of Donald DeFries who was in prison, and he ended up recruiting a couple of the communists to follow him. And Don DeFries recruited a couple of the communists from Venceremos who'd been sent to the jail to recruit him, and he recruited them. And they ended up breaking him out of jail. And eventually, they started a small group. It was never more than a handful of people, like 10 people or something. And they called themselves the Symbionese Liberation Army. I guess the term symbiosis relates, it's in biology. I forget the meaning of it. It's a biological term. And they called themselves the Symbionese Liberation Army. And they made a logo for themselves. I'll put their logo on the screen. It's a really wild logo. It's like, this is their logo. I'll put their logo. This was their symbol that they made for their organization. Hold on. I'll put it up here. It's just a wild organization that they started, the Symbionese Liberation Army. And they were what you could call a left adventurist or a terrorist organization. They didn't want to organize the broad masses of people. They wanted to engage in provocative left adventurism. Their symbol is supposed to be a snake with many different heads. That was the symbol of the Symbionese Liberation Army. And they engaged in assassinations and bombings and kidnappings, etc. And they were just a low-level, very small terrorist organization. And their first action was that they killed Marcus Foster. Marcus Foster was the first black superintendent of schools in Oakland, California. And he was kind of a hero in the community because he was African-American. He was the superintendent of the schools. But he implemented a policy that required the students at the high schools to wear ID badges, identification badges. And the Symbionese Liberation Army thought that was a fascist policy to require all the students to carry ID. And on top of that, they thought that if they killed the superintendent, Marcus Foster, that they would spark an uprising, that the high school kids would all be inspired to go out and revolt because someone shot the school superintendent. I'll put his picture up here because this whole incident is just kind of shows you how evil left adventurism, how delusional and crazy left adventurist folks can be. This guy was the first African-American superintendent of schools in Oakland, California, kind of a hero to the black community. He implemented a policy that students had to carry ID with them. And so they shot him. They killed him. They assassinated him. The Symbionese Liberation Army shot Marcus Foster, which was absolutely insane. They killed Marcus Foster. And at the time, everyone assumed Marcus Foster had been killed by racists because who else would kill the first black superintendent of schools in Oakland, California? Who else would kill them? Well, it turned out that it was the Symbionese Liberation Army that killed him. All right. It was this group of deranged, ultra-left, adventurist, Maoist terrorists. They killed Marcus Foster, and they didn't just kill him. I mean, they killed him dead, as they said. They didn't just shoot him. They shot him with bullets that were hollowed out and filled with cyanide. So not only did they shoot bullets into him, but the bullets they shot into him, the bullets that they shot into him were full of cyanide. So he didn't have a chance. They killed him dead. Oh, good question. They killed him dead. Marcus Foster. He didn't have a chance. They killed him dead. Marcus Foster was killed. And it was the Symbionese Liberation Army that killed him. And eventually then they kidnapped Patty Hearst, this heiress, this wealthy heiress, from a right-wing family, conservative family. And so they kidnapped Patty Hearst, and they demanded that the Hearst family, this millionaire, ultra-rich family, that they, that they give $2 million worth of free food away in the poor neighborhoods of Oakland, California. Give $2 million worth of free food away. And that was their ransom demand for Patty Hearst. Well, what's wild is that, the Hearst family did it, and they distributed this free food. And all over the media at the time, there was just a huge campaign shaming anyone who got this food, right? If you went and got this food from the Symbionese Liberation Army, from the ransom food, you were a bad person. That was the idea, right? There was just a huge amount of shaming. Ronald Reagan, who was the governor of California, said he hoped that there was an outbreak of botulism. He hoped that the people who ate the food, the poor people who went and got the food, would all get sick and get ill, right? And there was just a huge attack. The idea that people would go and get this food, that was considered to be, you were a bad person because this poor woman had been kidnapped, and this food was like sinfully acquired. It was bad food. You shouldn't go do it. But that didn't stop thousands and thousands and thousands of people from lining up to get this free food from the Symbionese Liberation Army. And that showed that even, back in these days, this was a time when the U.S. economy was actually quite strong. There was a very, very strong economy in the United States, a very comfortable middle class. But that showed that even in the so-called good old days, back when the economy was better, back when there was all this student debt, back when people owned their own homes, even in those days, there was a lot of hunger across America. And that thousands and thousands of poor people turned out, and the media couldn't ignore it. And they raised awareness to the fact that in Oakland, California, there were a lot of very hungry people. And the police were so angry at the black people for turning out to get this food. And they were angry that, that this wealthy woman had been kidnapped in order to get it, that the police started throwing turkeys at people's heads. And the police didn't want the food to be handed out. So they started picking up frozen turkeys and throwing them at black people's heads. And there was rioting that broke out as the free food was being given away because the police resented having to give the free food away. It was all a wild, wild story. Wild incident. And it gets even more interesting because, one of the people who was helping distribute the free food was an FBI informant named Sarah Jane Moore. The FBI, she'd been involved in the Air Force or something like that. And the FBI contacted her and had her go hand out some of the free food to see if she could find out if any of the other volunteers to hand out the free food were actually involved with the Symbionese Liberation Army, to help them catch the Symbionese Liberation Army. So she was an FBI informant who pretended to volunteer among the people handing out the free food. And as she was handing out the free food with the Symbionese Liberation Army admirers who were handing out the free food and pretending to be a communist and a supporter of them, she got convinced, I guess. And she then had a press conference and announced to the media that she was an FBI informant, that the FBI had sent her there and that it was wrong and they were violating the rights of these people. And this woman named Sarah Jane Moore announced that she was an FBI informant among the food distributors, which was very odd. And then a little while later, she then tried to kill President Gerald Ford. She shot President Gerald Ford. She didn't hit him. She missed, but she became an attempted presidential assassin. Very, very, very strange incident. Again, this is the Bay Area. This is why I'm telling you all this history. I'm building up to Dianne Feinstein. We're not even close to Dianne Feinstein yet. There's so much left before we get there. Right. So that's the Bay Area, right? The Bay Area in the 1970s. Right. There's radicals. Let me mention that Kamala Harris, her roots go back to the Bay Area. She's from the Bay Area. Her father was studying economics at UC Berkeley. Her mother was getting her medical degree at UC Berkeley. They met and they started dating. They met at civil rights protests. Her father was a Marxist economist, was studying Marxism. Her mother was learning to eventually become a cancer researcher. Her father's from Jamaica. And they got married, and then they had 2 children while they were living at UC Berkeley. And they took little Kamala Harris to protests, supposedly, in her stroller. And then Kamala Harris's mother and father divorced. And Kamala Harris says in her autobiography that all they fought over was the books. And we know that that was a big fat lie, that actually there was a very ugly custody battle in which Kamala Harris' father says that the fact that he was from the Caribbean, that he was Jamaican, was used against him. And that he says that the courts, the courts perceived him, they thought of stereotypes of Black men and of men from the Caribbean, and they thought he wouldn't be a good father. And he didn't get to see his daughters, and he lost the ability to see his daughters, and in an ugly custody battle in which the stereotype of him as being an irresponsible dad, the stereotype that's thrown at Black men and at Caribbean men in particular was thrown at him. And he resents that. He lost access to it. He wrote an essay about this, Reflections of a Jamaican Father. And then Kamala Harris's mother, who's from India, raised her and her sister and her sisters, right? And her mother took young Kamala Harris and her sister to a Black cultural center called Rainbow Sign. Rainbow Sign was a Black cultural center that was set up in Oakland, California. And young Kamala Harris and her sister, they were involved in musical performances, and they went there frequently. We now know that it's very likely that this Black cultural center was a front for the CIA, because of the fact that at the time the CIA was funding cultural Black nationalism in opposition to the Black Panthers. The Black Panthers were very popular in Oakland. Black communist organizations were growing. And one of the founders of Rainbow Sign was James Baldwin. And James Baldwin was a very well-known Black essayist and writer who was in favor of civil rights and opposed to racism, but was also anti-communist. And it's now a matter of public record that the CIA, the Paris Review, which was a CIA-funded magazine, is responsible for making James Baldwin famous. And James Baldwin helped set up Rainbow Sign Cultural Center. So this CIA Black Cultural Nationalist Center that was set up in the Bay Area to kind of pull Black people away from the Black Panther Party and get them to focus on cultural issues, traditional African dance and such, and not focus on economics and class struggle and anti-imperialism. It was, set up by the CIA. That is where little Kamala Harris got her political training and education. This is a very wild bit of information. So amid all of this turmoil I'm telling you about Patty Hearst and all of this, amid all of this turmoil, little Kamala Harris is growing up, and, eventually her mother moves to Quebec, and she spends most of her teen years in Canada, which she never talks about. This is all crazy. I'm just telling you how insane this is. So back to the Patty Hearst thing. Right? Back to the Patty Hearst thing. Now, Patty Hearst had been kidnapped by the Symbionese Liberation Army. Patty Hearst's family was required to give away all this free food. But apparently Patty Hearst converted. They recruited her. And she recorded a message and announced that she'd become a communist. She was taking on the name Tanya. And Patty Hearst, this wealthy young heiress, she joined the Symbionese Liberation Army, and she robbed banks at gunpoint, and she became an active member of the group. She later claimed she had what was called Stockholm Syndrome. It's that, if you're being captured, if you're being held prisoner, you begin to sympathize and believe what your captors tell you. She claimed they brainwashed her. She still went to prison for a little while. She robbed banks, and she was an active member. Here, I'll show you her picture when she joined the Symbionese Liberation Army. It was wild. They recruited this super rich girl. They recruited her to join their group. Here, I'll show you. This is Patty Hearst. Where this is, she posed for a photograph with her gun and everything. It's wild. It's a really wild story. Here, I'll put the picture up for you. They recruited her to their group. Right. And she engaged in bank robberies and attacks and violence with them. It's really wild. This is Patty Hearst after she joined the Symbionese Liberation Army. She's got her gun there. She's got their flag behind them. It's wild. They recruited a rich girl. To be a bank robbing, ultra left, adventurous, terrorist, Maoist. Yeah, that was wild stuff. Wild stuff. Wild stuff. People that were in the Bay Area during these years talk about how the Bay Area, it was just like a center of radicalism. You had so many different communist organizations in the Bay Area. You had the Communist Party that was in the Bay Area. Angela Davis got her start at the University of California, Los Angeles, and had been fired from being a professor because there's a California law that no communist can work for the state of California. And so Angela Davis had been fired from her job at UCLA, and she became kind of the cause célèbre, the celebrity of the Communist Party USA. She led a group called the Che Lumumba Club that was a Black-oriented African-American and Latino people of color wing of the Communist Party. That was significantly more radical than the Communist Party itself. And Angela Davis gave political education classes to the Black Panther Party, and she began corresponding and writing letters to George Jackson, who was a prisoner who was a member of the Black Panther Party. And eventually George Jackson's brother tried to break him out of jail and took hostages, and there was a whole thing. And then eventually they tried to put Angela Davis on trial for it, and she was acquitted. And all over the communist world, people were supporting Angela Davis. Free Angela Davis became the rallying cry of the communist world. 1972, she was acquitted at a trial in California, and it was like all over the world, all over the Soviet Union. There were posters and TV specials about Angela Davis. And Angela Davis was all over Africa. People were talking about her in Cuba and East Germany and everywhere. Angela Davis became kind of, to the communist world, she was the symbol of the Black freedom struggle in the United States. She was the spokesperson for the Communist Party. The older guy, Gus Hall, was this old labor union guy from the 60s who was the Communist Party boss. But his second in command was Angela Davis from the Bay Area, who had a huge afro. She had studied under the CIA's Congress for Cultural Freedom program with Herbert Marcuse. And in Germany, she basically learned, everything she knew from the postmodernists. But then she decided to join the Communist Party, and it looks like her parents had been friendly with the Communist Party. Her childhood best friend was Bettina Aptheker, whose father was Herbert Aptheker, who was a scholar of African-American history, who was well known in the Communist Party. It was a Communist Party leader. Eventually, Bettina Aptheker, his daughter, accused him of molesting her, and that's a whole nother story. I'll be getting to that, Lisa. Don't worry. I'll be getting to that, but you're on the list. That was all in the Bay Area. That you had George Jackson and his death. You had Angela Davis's trial. You had all of this happening in the Bay Area, right? In addition to that, you had a lot of Trotskyite organizations. The Spartacist League operated in the Bay Area. And they were this Trotskyite group that considered the various other groups to not be revolutionary enough. And they gained a reputation for going to other people's events and getting into fistfights with them. And they sold the Workers' Vanguard, and they wore leather jackets, and they were notorious for getting into fistfights with people. The Revolutionary Union, which was started by Bob Avakian, eventually became the Revolutionary Communist Party in 1975. Bob Avakian was from the Bay Area. Berkeley was kind of where they were headquartered, where they were at. And Bob Avakian and the Revolutionary Union and Maoists seemed to be a really big deal in the Bay Area during these years. And the other thing that got going and was very big in San Francisco was the gay rights movement, right? That was a big thing. In New York City, they had the Stonewall riots, but San Francisco was known for a city where gay people congregated. And that apparently started during World War II. If you were in the Pacific and you were gay and you got kicked out of the military, they would dump you in San Francisco if you got kicked out of the military. And so a lot of men who were caught being gay in the military would get dumped in San Francisco. And San Francisco became known as kind of a gay hangout, a gay city. And that was, you had the gay rights movement, the rainbow flag, etc. And that's where we start getting to Dianne Feinstein. right? So we have the political upsurge of the 60s, everything's going on. As the 1970s get going, things in the country start to kind of get back to normal. There's an economic downturn in 1972. Richard Nixon is eventually booted out of office. He's forced to resign as president, and the country is starting to calm down. And a lot of 60s radicals are getting involved in the Democratic Party. They're running for office. They're campaigning and running for office, etc. That's, Bernie Sanders gets his start around this time in local politics in Vermont. A lot of New York City radicals moved up to Vermont and started participating in elections. And, there's a lot of people that were involved in kind of street protests and rioting and stuff. They start getting involved in electoral politics. Well, two individuals in San Francisco were kind of the face of radical leftists getting involved in local politics. And those individuals are George Moscone and Harvey Milk. George Moscone is a Democrat. He's a liberal, but he's he advocates national health care. He's like a Bernie Sanders liberal, right? He's far left. He wants peace with the Soviet Union. He's friendly to the gay rights movement, and he thinks that the gay people ought to be able to do what they do. And George Moscone gets elected to be mayor of San Francisco. And George Moscone, he's just an old school liberal. He's further to the left than most Democrats in San Francisco at the time. And he's known to, just have kind of left-wing politics. George Moscone. Here, I'll put an image of George Moscone on here. An Italian-American, appointed African Americans and Asian Americans and gay people to serve in government. That was kind of his trademark, was that he appointed minorities. He believed in labor unions. He believed in national health care. Just kind of a liberal politician who was aligned with radicals, communists and others who joined the Democratic Party as the period of upsurge of protests and all of that started to calm down. This is George Moscone, right? George Moscone, he's the mayor of San Francisco. And he's, a far left mayor, you could say, right? He's not a communist, but he's a far left mayor, right? So then you have Harvey Milk, right? And Harvey Milk is the first openly gay elected official in American history. Harvey Milk is a gay small business owner, who was involved in getting the gay bars of San Francisco to boycott Coors. Coors is a beer that's not union. And so he got the gay bars in town to boycott this anti-union beer. And so he was kind of, a hero to the labor movement. He got the labor movement and the gay rights movement together. And he was this well-known gay community activist, small business owner. I think he owned a camera store. And he eventually got to be elected as an alderman in San Francisco. And he got to be elected as an alderman. He's the first openly gay elected official in San Francisco. And he's openly gay, and he talks about being gay. And, there's starting to be a pushback against gay rights. And there's starting to be a pushback against, the gay rights movement. The gay people are very open, saying we're gay and all of this. There's gay teachers and this is something that much of the population is not comfortable with. And so Harvey Milk kind of becomes a national figure because he's openly gay and he's elected official. And, he makes jokes about it. He begins all of his speeches by saying, "I'm Harvey Milk and I'm here to recruit you." And the joke was, that he was recruiting you to be gay, right? That was a stereotype about gay people, is that they recruit people. And he was saying, "I'm here to recruit you to be an activist," but it was like a joke. "I'm here to recruit you." And, he was just this kind of well-known figure in San Francisco politics. But, here is the part that no one talks about. They made a movie about Harvey Milk, and they barely mentioned this. And this is a really important detail that the San Francisco Democratic Party and the gay rights movement and all kinds of people never, ever, ever want to talk about. Harvey Milk and George Moscone both had a pretty big skeleton in their closet. And no one ever talks about this. No one ever talks about this. But Harvey Milk would never have gotten elected, and George Moscone would never have gotten elected mayor of San Francisco if they weren't backed by this guy. Both of them were backed by this man. They both got a huge amount of support in the terms of volunteers for their campaign and outreach and donations, and they all got a huge amount of support from this man, the infamous Reverend Jim Jones. Reverend Jim Jones. Jim Jones was the head of a church called the People's Temple. And the People's Temple was a church in the San Francisco Bay Area. It had started in Indiana. It had eventually moved to Ukiah, California, and they moved to San Francisco. And that church believed that that this guy, Reverend Jim Jones, was the combined reincarnation of Jesus and Lenin in one body. He was Jesus and Lenin in one body, sent to Earth, and he was sent to Earth to destroy religion and to announce the death of God, right? He taught that religion taught about the sky god, and that the sky god had died, and sent Jim Jones to the earth to announce that the sky god no longer existed, and that there was no more any religion, right? And to destroy religion. He was the Messiah, the combined reincarnation of Jesus and Lenin, sent to the planet Earth by the dying sky god to announce that religion was to exist no more. I'm not making this up, right? It's, you want to talk about kooky beliefs. All right, okay. Right, that's the idea. And you're on the list, right? And Reverend Jim Jones, his People's Temple was a church that existed in the black community in San Francisco. There were a lot of white members as well. There were a lot of white members, but it was largely a black religious organization. And they did fake healings. They claimed that Reverend Jim Jones could put his hands on people and heal them. They staged fake healings, pretended to heal people. They claimed he could perform miracles, etc. And they were, they claimed they were both Christians and communists, and Reverend Jim Jones was, the Messiah. And it was a very strange religious organization that existed in the Bay Area. And not only Reverend Jim Jones was so important to George Moscone that he was actually elected, that when George Moscone was elected, he appointed Reverend Jim Jones to be the head of the Housing Commission. So the San Francisco Housing Board had Reverend Jim Jones appointed as its commissioner. He was the housing commissioner for the San Francisco Board of Housing. Right? That's how influential and important Reverend Jim Jones was. Reverend Jim Jones was this very important person, and he got his church members to all go out and campaign for Harvey Milk, campaign for George Moscone, and they paid him back by making him the head of the housing board. So now, of course, we know how politics works, and that Reverend Jim Jones had, quite a bit of skeletons in his closet, as you could say, and a lot of scandals came to the surface, right? There was a lot of crazy things going on inside the church. As you can imagine, Reverend Jim Jones is having sex with everybody and, torturing people and doing all kinds of really awful, horrendous stuff, So after the scandals start revealing Reverend Jim Jones's notoriously cruel activities, just stuff that shocks the conscience. In order to, when you became a full member of the church, you had to write a letter confessing to molesting your own children. And that was their blackmail on you if you wanted to leave. Right? That's the level of control that they put over people, right? Every member of the church had to write a letter in their own hand confessing to molesting their own children that they could turn over to the police if they ever left the group. Just stuff like that, right? And torturing people and, all kinds of things. So it was a pretty nasty organization, and whatever. So as the scandals and revelations about Reverend Jim Jones, started to come out, Reverend Jim Jones packed up all his followers and moved them to Guyana, which at the time, Guyana was a Soviet-aligned country. And they were living in Guyana. And their eventual plan in Guyana was to eventually leave Guyana and move to the Soviet Union. And so all of his followers, thousands of followers, they all moved to Guyana. And in Guyana, we know what happened, which is a member of the U.S. Congress who was investigating the CIA. Again, now there's so many layers to all of this. There was something going on at the time called the Congressional Church Committee. You ever heard of the Congressional Church Committee? Well, the Congressional Church Committee was a congressional investigation about the FBI and the CIA, right? And COINTELPRO was being revealed. Congress was having hearings where members of Congress were interrogating, and the FBI was revealing that they had done COINTELPRO, that they'd killed Fred Hampton, that they'd targeted activist groups. There's kind of a truth and reconciliation for the 1960s going on. And the Congressional Church Committee is revealing all kinds of nasty things done by the FBI and done by the CIA during the 1960s political upsurge. And one of the members of Congress, who is leading the Congressional Church Committee, one of the members of Congress, he decides he's going to go to Jonestown. He's going to go down to Guyana and investigate. Right? The congressman, I want to get his name right. Congressman Leo Ryan. That was right. I knew his name. Leo Ryan was his name. He was a member of Congress who was investigating the CIA, and he was revealing all the CIA and FBI's dirty deeds during the 60s before the Congressional Church Committee. And there were rumors about people living in Guyana, living in Jonestown, who wanted to leave and couldn't escape. There were rumors. And so Congressman Leo Ryan announced that he was going to fly down to Jonestown and investigate it for himself. And he would have a plane. And if any Americans wanted to leave with Congressman Leo Ryan, they could get on the plane and leave. And what happened? Well, as Congressman Leo Ryan was getting ready to leave, they opened fire and killed them all. And he was killed, and so were, some other people, and, they were killed. So then after that, Reverend Jim Jones had all of his followers drink cyanide in Kool-Aid. That's where the expression drink the Kool-Aid comes from. And they all drank cyanide. It was almost 1,000 people, and they all committed mass suicide in Guyana. Horrendous event. It was a mass suicide. Now, why exactly they committed mass suicide is up for debate. Some people think that they expected that the USA would invade Guyana and use the killing of the congressman as a pretext. Guyana was a Soviet-aligned country at that time, and so they thought maybe that by committing mass suicide, that would prevent the invasion of Guyana. Many people believed that they were going to storm, Jonestown. There would be like a Waco situation, so they committed mass suicide to just get it over with. Some people think that the government of Guyana forced them to commit suicide as a way to prevent the pending U.S. invasion, or we don't know exactly why they decided to commit mass suicide. We don't know why, but they did. They committed mass suicide, and it was a horrendous incident, the Jonestown incident. And it was horrible. And I mean, just, the images of just hundreds, at least 900 dead bodies everywhere. It was a horrendous incident. And the whole country was horrified. And this created a bit of a scandal for the Democratic Party of San Francisco, right? There had been a fundraiser for the People's Temple that was supposed to happen like 2 or 3 days later. And the press reported, wow, this fundraiser that all these prominent politicians like Harvey Milk and George Moscone are supposed to be speaking at, this fundraiser is empty, and Angela Davis, who's the Communist Party leader, she had been a big supporter of Reverend Jim Jones. She'd gone over to his apartment and hung out with him. They had her call in, and they played her voice over big speakers at Jonestown. And she and Jim Jones, Angela Davis and Jim Jones were good friends. And I want to ask Angela Davis about that. I'm sure she'll never agree to be interviewed about that. But, Angela Davis and Reverend Jim Jones were good buddies. And there you go. And so they committed mass suicide. And that's a huge embarrassment for the Democrats in San Francisco, because this guy who they appointed to be the head of the Housing Commission, who got George Moscone and Harvey Milk elected, Well, turns out he led his followers to go commit mass suicide. So just a couple weeks, just 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks after that, just a normal day in San Francisco, a former police officer named Dan White comes into City Hall and he kills Harvey Milk, shoots him, and then he shoots Mayor George Moscone. A double murder, right? And this former police officer walks into City Hall, shoots George Moscone, the mayor of San Francisco, shoots Harvey Milk, kills them, and walks out of City Hall. Who then becomes mayor of San Francisco? Dianne Feinstein. Dianne Feinstein, the old lady I just saw. I'll write it down. Dianne Feinstein, the old lady I just showed you in the clip, she first became a prominent political figure when she became mayor as a result of George Moscone and Harvey Milk both getting shot. And in fact, she's the one who discovered their bodies. She's the one who walked in and saw the corpse. Imagine that. Now, Dan White, the former police officer who killed both George Moscone and Harvey Milk, was given only a 2-year prison sentence. How often does that happen? How can you kill the mayor of a major city and a city council member, an alderman of a major city, and only get a 2-year prison sentence? No, you can't do that usually. But that's what happened for Dan White. He got a 2-year prison sentence by using the infamous Twinkie defense. The Twinkie defense. He said junk food made him do it. He had eaten so much junk food, the junk food had gotten into his mind and caused him to have mental illness, and he killed the mayor and he killed the alderman. Shady? I think so. Then, after Dan White was released from jail, he committed suicide shortly afterwards. After he was released from jail. Very mysterious. Very, very mysterious. But that's how Dianne Feinstein became mayor. So after she walked in and she just happened to be there, I guess. She just opened the door and then there were the dead bodies, you know. She walked in on them and was just so horrified to see their bodies. And then they swore, middle of the night, they swore in Dianne Feinstein as the mayor of San Francisco. Yeah, I look at all of that, and I have a really hard time believing there's not more than meets the eye going on there. But, this is all many years ago. All the evidence has been destroyed. There's no way to prove exactly what did happen. I have a hard time believing that there's not more to this story than that. Anyhow, that's how Dianne Feinstein became the mayor of San Francisco. So she becomes the mayor of San Francisco, right? And the gay community in San Francisco goes out and riots because Harvey Milk has just been killed, right? He's their hero, the first gay elected official. So all the gay people in San Francisco, they all start throwing bricks through windows and stuff. And it's a former police officer who killed, the mayor. So they start targeting police cars, torching police cars, etc. And Dianne Feinstein is famous for having told the police department to let the gay people riot. She told the police department, just let the gays riot. Just let the gay people have their riot. And she basically told the police department to hold back and let the gay people riot. What's interesting, though, is after the riots, the police did retaliate by raiding a number of gay bars. And raiding a number of gay bars, just, beating up. And they just had, a couple weeks where they just targeted every gay bar in town and beat up the gay people in revenge. And it was pretty clear that the Democratic Party and the Democratic administration liked gay people to San Francisco because they brought in tourism. San Francisco being a gay mecca was good for business. The police department, on the other hand, these are Irish Catholics and, conservatives, and they didn't like gay people and they didn't like San Francisco becoming a gay city. And this was a point of contention in local politics. But Dianne Feinstein, her nickname, interestingly, is they called her Dorothy because she looked like this cute, adorable girl. And that the gay rights movement has made Somewhere Over the Rainbow, right, from The Wizard of Oz. They've made that kind of a theme song for the gay rights movement. What's the woman who sang it? The woman who sang it. What's her name? Who sang Somewhere Over the Rainbow? She was Dorothy in Wizard of Oz. What's her name? What was her name? The singer. I can't remember her name. Judy Garland. Judy Garland, the actress and the singer. She was notoriously loved by gay people. Shortly after her death, you had the Stonewall riots. Judy Garland. For a long time, a code word for gay people was they would say that gay people were friends of Dorothy. Right, that was a euphemism for a homosexual because Judy Garland fans were known to be gay people. Her concerts would be gay cruising, events. And so Judy Garland, a slang term for a gay person, was a friend of Dorothy. Well, Dianne Feinstein, they called her Dorothy because she was this adorable, cute little, girl, and she was of Jewish heritage, this cute little Jewish girl who wore a cute little dress and was perky and smiley, and the gay people all loved her. So they used to call Dianne Feinstein Dorothy. That was her nickname, and she became the mayor of San Francisco after Harvey Milk was killed, after George Moscone was killed, after the mass suicide in Jonestown. And that's how we got Dianne Feinstein. So I just gave you kind of a history of what's going on in San Francisco, right? And that's where the Democratic Party machine of San Francisco comes from. And, take from that what you want. I talked about Kamala Harris and her background and how she fits into all of this. We know eventually she became the district attorney for San Francisco. For a long time, she was the girlfriend, the arm candy of Willie Brown, who was a prominent, political figure in the San Francisco Bay Area. And eventually she became the district attorney and then California state attorney general. And she's now the vice president of the United States. She comes out of there. Her father has denounced her, called her campaign a travesty of identity politics. And I've written a whole book about Kamala Harris. We just saw Dianne Feinstein and how out of it she really is. And really, when I look into San Francisco politics, right, and that's where it becomes very, very apparent, very, very, very apparent that what I talk about, what has become kind of a focus of a lot of my videos and speeches about the synthetic left, that is so much of a factor there, right? Everything I just described to you, from Jonestown to the kidnapping of Patty Hearst, Project MK Ultra, all of this is the meddling of intelligence agencies in American politics. That's all of this. All of this is that, right? The meddling of the intelligence community, the shadow government, the CIA, the intelligence apparatus in American politics, from, funding the synthetic left, promoting drug use, and that the San Francisco Bay Area, the Bay Area was a center of psychological operations by the American government, the drugging of the American public, the funding and covert manipulation of left-wing and socialist politics, you name it, right? It was a mess. And, out of that area, when they talk about Silicon Valley, we know that Silicon Valley was largely created. Again, this is another theme that I talk about in my book, Where is America Going? Where did the computer revolution come from? The computer revolution was largely the result of the Brzezinski strategy of putting the USA at the center of the information revolution. The Stanford Research Institute, which was directed by none other than Marilyn Ferguson, right? She wasn't the director of it, but she was the intellectual guru who was offering the guidance for it. Marilyn Ferguson, the occult guru, the spiritual advisor to Al Gore, who wrote The Aquarian Conspiracy, right? She's out of the Bay Area also. She writes, America is free, but California is freer. The Aquarian Conspiracy, this magical awakening that's not pro-communist or anti-communist. It's just about freedom and human enlightenment, and it's sweeping the world. The Aquarian Conspiracy, that is Marilyn Ferguson, and that's the Stanford Research Institute, and that's the liberal CIA. All of that is happening, and the Bay Area is just a hub of intelligence meddling, social engineering, psychological operations, and manipulation in politics, all done to make sure that we never have communism in America. I mean, that's really what the whole purpose of all that was about. Right? It's like we got to create a synthetic left to prevent the emergence of an actual left. We got to manipulate the politics. We got to figure out, CIA mind control and give everyone acid. Like you look at like the San Francisco Bay Area, it is just so much of, the whole area was like, it was like a giant lab, and they turned the population there into lab rats. They're giving them LSD. They're manipulating their politics. You got a crazy pastor who thinks he's Lenin, who thinks he's Jesus, to destroy religion, wants to destroy the sky god. You've got the Symbionese Liberation Army. You've got, you got black cultural centers set up by the American government to counter the Black Panther Party. You go look at it. There's so much psyoping and manipulation and every effort to confuse and manipulate people, right? And that's when you look at the San Francisco Bay Area and everything that led up to Dianne Feinstein emerging to be mayor of San Francisco and eventually a U.S. senator. What you're looking at is decades and decades of psychological manipulation and sinister social engineering operations carried out by the ultra-rich in their effort to try and stabilize capitalism. This is the Eastern establishment and their vision in progress. And I got to tell you that, and I'll just end by making this point, that the time that we're in now, the Biden administration and the Obama administration as well, this was the return of the Carter administration. Because this is what Jimmy Carter's administration was like, right? Jimmy Carter's administration was very much... Jimmy Carter was this tired old man. He's a peanut farmer. I understand you are upset, and he was all about environmentalism. I wear a sweater instead of turning on the heat. I am Jimmy Carter. Owning things and having things and buying things is not going to make you happy, right? I'm the governor. I'm a peanut farmer. I saw myself a UFO. I saw a UFO. I actually communicated with extraterrestrials. I believe in UFOs, and I'm going to reveal all the documents about the UFOs when I get to be elected to be the president. And I am going to send my brother, Billy Carter, I am going to put him on a plane to go dance and party with Gaddafi. Right? Gaddafi is the leader of Libya. And so my brother, who has a very low IQ and owns his own brand of beer, he is going to get on a plane and go become the best bud of Gaddafi. And this is true. Billy Carter, Jimmy Carter's brother, was partying with Gaddafi, was Gaddafi's best bud, was partying with Gaddafi, in addition to that, you had, you had all kinds of crazy things going on, and that Brzezinski came into the White House. He was the national security advisor to Jimmy Carter, and they started, they armed the Mujahideen to fight the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. They started the Contra War in Nicaragua and maneuvering to fight the Sandinistas. They were talking about UFOs. The government was promoting feminism. They had the women's conference, the famous women's conference in Texas that they funded with government money to have this big conference about the women's agenda, and all the woke stuff. That was the Carter administration. Jimmy Carter met with gay rights activists at the White House, and degrowth was all about it. They published the Global 2000 report saying it was urgently necessary to reduce the human population, to reduce consumption. They started implementing dramatic degrowth policies. As the economy shut down in 78, 79, there was an economic crisis. And then they just started, they got rid of all the laws concerning money lending, all the state usury laws, A lot of states had a law that you couldn't lend money at more above a certain rate of interest. All of them were nullified by the Federal Reserve. Paul Volcker was there. You had a purge of the Democratic Party. They went after the smokestack Democrats who believed in nuclear power, who believed in growth. And they had scam, it was called, and that everything, the FBI going after dissidents and I mean, all of this, the Carter administration, that was the politics that really didn't come back until Obama, right? Bill Clinton was doing something different. The Clinton administration, they were Democrats, but they were doing something different. The Clinton administration, that was a completely different thing. That wasn't a full-on Eastern establishment CIA presidency. But Obama was a Brzezinskiist. He was a student of Zbigniew Brzezinski. That's what Jimmy Carter called himself, and that's what Obama was as well, as a graduate of Columbia University's International School. And that's what Biden is as well. And the Biden administration, where he's fallen down the steps and, and he's tired, man, why can't we just be nice, man? This is America. We don't have torchlit marches, man. We don't do that, I mean, and all the woke stuff, all of it. This is Jimmy Carter. We're living in Jimmy Carter administration 2.0. They got the upper hand with Silicon Valley, right? It took them a while, but the computer revolution, that is really the brainchild that would never have happened thanks to the free market, happened because of the intelligence agencies pouring all their resources into, as Al Gore said, inventing the internet. Marilyn Ferguson, his spiritual advisor, as the government and the CIA, poured out loans to create IBM, to help Apple move ahead, to create Facebook, to create Amazon, to create. I mean, you can read about the NSA, CIA roots of all of that. Silicon Valley was built by the American intelligence agencies, and eventually, as they pieced together social media. As they learned from MySpace and they brought us Facebook and Twitter and Obama as president and the Arab Spring, we are now seeing the intensified power of the liberal wing of the CIA, the Rockefellers, the Silicon Valley tech monopolists, the ultra monopolies, the ultra rich have seized power. And they are trying to use all the dirty tricks that they have up their sleeves, like drugs, right? Now, all of a sudden, hallucinogens are back in. We're legalizing marijuana in a number of states, which I'm for legalization. I don't think anyone should be jailed for using drugs. But the marijuana that's legal now is much more potent than the marijuana they had back in the day that was illegal. And I would not encourage people to smoke it. Let me just put it that way. And they're pushing hallucinogens like crazy as part of therapy now. Every dirty trick these people had up their sleeves, every single dirty trick that they had up their sleeves back in the day, every dirty trick, every dirty trick that they had under their sleeves back in the day, is now being rolled out, right? The Eastern establishment is back in power with their creation, Silicon Valley. And what do they want? They want degrowth. They want global revolution and instability brought to you by Facebook, and they want degrowth, all to save capitalism from itself, all to bring the world back into balance. It's a demented occult fantasy that if we have this big apocalyptic explosion, this giant orgasm, with nukes going off and all these people dying, then the universe will come back into balance with Mother Nature, and human beings and fish will peacefully coexist, as George W. Bush said. That's what they want, right? Read the Aquarian conspiracy. Read what all these occult gurus want. It's all there, right? There's too many people in the world. We're expanding too much. We're consuming too much. We're breeding too much. We've gotten out of balance with nature. We're not spiritual enough. And, what we need this giant correction. And the biggest danger, of course, is populism. Populism like China, like Russia, like Cuba, like Iran, like Donald Trump, like Bernie Sanders. We can't have any of that populism stuff. That's really dangerous. Populism might lead to some kind of authoritarian socialist state where the intellectuals aren't free to do their thing. The useless eaters will come and take over and force the economy to work for everybody. We can't have that. No, we've got to have this gigantic apocalypse. We've got to have the Aquarian conspiracy. I mean, this is what they want, right? There's a belief among a lot of people who call themselves leftists that only the right wing are backed by the American deep state, right? That, the CIA is right wing, the FBI is right wing. And I'm telling you that, right wing beliefs are everywhere in the United States. This is the homeland of anti-communism. Right wing beliefs are everywhere. Conservative Christianity is everywhere. Free market delusions are everywhere. That's par for the course in America. But at the center of the American power structure, at the top of the banks, at the top of Silicon Valley, at the top of the intelligence apparatus, there are some people who right wing is not the way to describe them. I wouldn't describe them as socialists or communists. They're certainly not that. Some of them may even call themselves that, but they're not that. They're degrowthers, they're pagans, they're primitivists, and they are anti-human Malthusians. And what they believe, I don't know what you want to call it, it's a mixed match of environmentalism and Malthusianism and occultism and mystical worship of anything that seems primitive, anything that seems backward. And they are terrified of Russia and China, and they want instability and chaos. And, their beliefs, they come in many different packages. Many different packages. Some of them package it in a Buddhist package. Some of them package it in a Aquarian conspiracy, package. Some of them are into the psychic stuff, telekinesis. Some of them are new atheists. Some of them are into Aleister Crowley and that whole thing. What do they call that? There's theosophy. There's a whole lot, but this is what is believed by the ultra rich. This is what they believe, right? This occultism, this occult mysticism, this anti-humanism, this radical individualism, this fear of the masses, this worship of nature and contempt for humanity. These are the beliefs that they have behind closed doors. When you talk about the Bohemian Grove in California, the Bohemian Club, right? Where, all these famous, prominent members of Congress and men are walking around naked and doing weird rituals. And this is what drives the QAnon people crazy. The QAnon people think they're all pedophiles. Some of them might be, right? We know about Jeffrey Epstein. I'm not ruling that out, but it's not a pedophile conspiracy, right? And this is driven by their ultimate material interest. At the end of the day, the reason they want the world to blow up and burst into flames, and the reason they want the human population to go down, is because that's the only way they can stay at the top. Because the human race is marching forward. We're inventing new things. We're raising people out of poverty. And their system can't handle the technological innovations it's created, right? And that the material basis is there more than ever now for a centrally planned socialist economy to unleash human creativity to astounding new heights, for us to march toward that ultimate goal of a stateless, classless world. Well, they don't want that. They're very afraid of that. And so they want chaos, death, and destruction and instability all around the world. They want a reduction of the human population. They want degrowth. They want to control us. They want to manipulate us. They want to use chaos as a weapon. The color revolutions that brought down the Soviet Union and the governments of Eastern Europe, they're part of it. In addition to that, you have the Arab Spring, which they, manipulated to serve their own ends. This is who is ruling America right now. Right? We have a technocratic ruling class. And, the Trump folks, the conservatives, they don't like them because they believe in growth, because they're the lower levels of capital, and they're conservatives. They believe in your typical conservative ideas, and they see these folks with a lot of money and a lot of power and a lot of ability to manipulate information. They see them as very dangerous. And there's a push and pull in our establishment between old school conservatives and capitalists who just believe in growth, and these folks, whatever you want to call them, the Aquarian conspirators, the wokeists, the degrowthers, the liberal CIA, the social engineers, the synthetic left, whatever you want to call them. They have at this point the upper hand, and that's what's going on in American politics. and we can do something about it by building an anti-monopoly coalition. And I've talked about that a lot in my recent streams. So I hope that was an inspiring opening remarks for everybody. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. All right, names and locations, folks. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us? Who is with us? And I'm looking on Rumble. And I'm looking on the Rockfin, right? I see J-Mo says, only me again, lonely at the top. Shout out to you, J-Mo, in the Rockfin. There's 3 people watching in the Rockfin. You're not the only one. There's 25 on Rumble, though, so I'll call you out. We got Kiwi Corner in Auckland, New Zealand is on the Rumble. Shout out to you, Kiwi Corner. Glad you're watching. Who else is here? Names and locations. We got Anthony from Detroit, Steve in Boston. We got Jamie in St. Paul, David Rennie in Hamilton, Ontario, Killian from Milwaukee, Minden out in Midwest, Olympia Logic, Balthazar in Oakland, Reza from Iran, Colin in Greensboro, Heidi from Edinburgh, Jamie from St. Paul, Bohemian Grove, California. Glad to have you. Kendall in San Diego, Rogue Valley, Oregon, Central California, Mima Flowers, good friend of our show, Lori from Oklahoma. She's got a great show of her own. Patrick in Maine. Zach Bunch has an amazing TikTok. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. David Fox says, test. Bob Troy in New York. Bad Kami from the United Kingdom. Lionel from Melbourne, Australia. We've got Battle Cossack. We've got Jose from Akron, Ohio. Welcome, Jose. We got Clinton Fraser from London. Gonzalo Garcia. We got Lisa Smith from Western Pennsylvania. Welcome. So glad to have you all here. Hello, Caleb. It's Mark from California. Mark Lark Bark from California. Welcome, Mark Lark Bark. Welcome. Kevin from Fayetteville is watching. He's a Dindigo Bait Me Baby on the Rumble. And there we go. We got Jessica from West Virginia. We got Jose Gonzalez from Caracas, Venezuela. We got the Seasoned Noob from China. Chris from Salt Lake City. We got Christopher Tejas, Alex from Brazil. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Let me see if there's any other names I missed. The only people that are letting me call them out in the Rumble are Auckland from New Zealand, Kiwiki Kiwi Corner, and Kevin from Fayetteville, North Carolina. And I don't see only one person in the Rockfin, but I'm calling people out, right? I want to treat all platforms equally. Tatiana from Fort Worth is with us. Welcome, Tatiana. Glad you're here. Hope you enjoy the show. We got Lack. Is that Lack? Welcome, Lack. All right. I wonder what was happening with YouTube. Is YouTube acting up and acting weird? Are we getting suppressed again? Shocker. Right? Shocker there. Us getting suppressed on social media, that never happens, right? There's totally not an effort, the unsubscriptions that I get randomly, every time they're messing with me. That's why. We got here from Charlotte, North Carolina, Ass Words. Very good. John in Memphis is with us. Dave, the slave raised from the grave, says David. Welcome, everybody. So glad that you're here. I've got 5 super chats to answer, but as I said, we are taking super chats on YouTube. We are taking Rumble rants on Rumble, and we are taking Rockfin tips to answer questions. And if you want to know my preference, I think Rumble rants are the best way to ask your question. But you can ask your question any way you want. You can do a super chat. You can do a Rumble rant. You can do a Rockfin tip. And I am going to spend the rest of our show answering super chat questions. I do just want to make a couple quick announcements for all of you that are here now that weren't here at the beginning of the show. You were still watching RFK, which I was a little bit late because I was listening to RFK defend Israel and stuff and shaking my head. And I'm sure a lot of you were doing the same thing. RFK is certainly interesting to all of us. And, I like a lot of what I hear him say, but not when he's talking about Israel, but certainly been interesting. But so the announcements, I just want to remind you all of a couple things. First things first is on Sunday, we got Humanity for Peace. Humanity for Peace is happening on Sunday. On Sunday, we've got Humanity for Peace. And Humanity for Peace is a great rally and protest happening at the United Nations on the anniversary of Hiroshima. It's going to be really important to be there. Scott Ritter is going to be there. Garland Nixon's going to be there. Other friends of ours, Daniel Burke, people like that are going to be there. Jose Vega is going to be there. I'll be there. And we at the Center for Political Innovation, Nick Brana of the People's Party is going to be there. We're all going to be there. It's going to be really, really important to be there. And there's sister rallies happening all around the country. If you're going to go rally in Chicago, CPI folks in Chicago are rallying around August 6th. We're going to have a rally in Portland, Oregon. There's going to be a rally in Seattle, a rally in Sacramento, a rally in San Francisco, Los Angeles. All over the country, people are rallying for the Humanity for Peace Day of Action against nuclear war on the anniversary of Hiroshima. So I encourage folks to do their best to participate. Please participate, endorse this action, participate in it. Libertarians, socialists, churches, anti-imperialists, all marching together. It's very, very important because we got to stop the danger of a new world war. We got to stop it right dead in its tracks. No more Hiroshima. So there's that. That's important. Now, the other thing that I wanted to quickly mention is that every single day on the CPI YouTube channel, every single day, every day, not every Tuesday, not every Wednesday, not every weekday, but every single day, we have a message, a morning message on the Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel. Every single day, every single day, we have a morning message. So we would really like it for you to go and watch the morning messages. Tomorrow's morning message is from somebody who I've never met before. Actually, I have met them once before, but I didn't know them because, long story, he tells on the video, who's a fan of these broadcasts. He likes these broadcasts, and he went to like one event that I did, and he made a beautiful message. So we got a message for tomorrow. That's really, really great. Lori has made a message. John has made a message. I mean, so many of the people from our community have stepped up to the plate. President Elizabeth Young, Kieran Killian from Milwaukee, and Tom from Detroit, and Gavin, and Peter Coffin. Oh, I'm going to forget somebody. Sam Bismuth just made a great message. And so many people have made great messages for the YouTube channel. Noah has made great messages. He's done 2 of them now. We're going to have another one tomorrow, but we need Rainer Shea. He did one, longtime friend, or new friend, really. I mean, he's been kind of hostile to us in the past, but he's very friendly now. He's coming around. He's starting to get it. Rainer made a message about, about resisting their psychological operations. And, it's been really, really awesome. We've had 16 messages so far. So if you're a friend of this community, if you're a member of the Center for Political Innovation, I would encourage you to make a morning message. We need as many morning messages as we can get. I've been reaching out to everybody in our community, all of our friends, people from different parts of the country, people from different parts of the world, even international friends and others, to record a morning message. So, we would like, if you're a fan of this community, email me a morning message. I'll watch it first. It has to be, you can't, say dirty, nasty things on there, but within reason, introduce yourself and give a message to the Center for Political Innovation community. And if you're a member of the Center for Political Innovation, you should watch it every day. Start your day this way, because the way you start your day is so important. It's so important. It sets the tone for the entire day. That's why every morning when I wake up, I drink my unnamed diet beverage and I listen to classical music. That's part of my morning routine. I sip my unnamed diet beverage and I listen to classical music. I try to start my day with rationality and reason, not raw emotion. And I sip my unnamed diet beverage. I listen to that classical music. And then I turn on this message, because start your day with CPI. Make CPI part of your daily routine. You need hope and optimism in your life, and you need hope and optimism that's based on revolution and socialism. Right? That's what you need in your life, right? If you're here and you're enjoying this community, I would encourage you to start your day with our morning messages. They are there for you. It is a service to our members, a service to our community done by our community. You'll get to meet a different member of our organization every single day. A different person steps up to the plate and does it. You'll get to start your day this way. It's a great way to start the day. I always read the comments that people leave, and so many different people are planning to make a message. Going to be a great message tomorrow from a totally new person. It was a great message today from Noah. He did it today, and before that was Sam. And I mean, there's just been so many good messages, and many of our members are going to do it multiple times, and there's nothing wrong with that. I know other people have already recorded second or third messages, and that's fine. We got to stay ahead of this. We're doing this every day. We are a community. We are in this together. We are in this together. We are up against a satanic world order that is trying to demoralize us, trying to make us feel hopeless, trying to make us believe there is no future beyond their dirty, rotten system. And so we need each other, and we need to depend on each other. We need to stand arm in arm, and we need to use their technology, their YouTube. They invented YouTube. We need to use it to solidify our own ranks, solidify our network, bond with each other. Start your day with the Center for Political Innovation's morning message. That is my request. If you want to get plugged in with this community and what we're doing, I would urge you to do this every single day. You don't have to join the CPI. You don't even have to ever talk to anybody, right? It's a service that is available to anybody, right? Lori gave a great message about FDR, and I mean, it's great. This community is here for a reason, and this is a service we are offering, but I urge you to take us up on it. Take us up on it, right? Take us up on it. Make us a part of your life. Make us a part of your daily routine. Just go to the CPI YouTube channel, and the messages are there. They premiere every morning at 6 a.m. Every morning at 6 a.m. Eastern time, the messages premiere. So if you're on the East Coast and you wake up after 6 o'clock, you're fine. On the West Coast, it'll, if you wake up after 9 o'clock, or you'll be fine, right? It's an early time. It's certainly an early time, but it's a great way to start the day. So there you go. 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. There you go. The last announcement I want to make before I start answering super chats is I would like to humbly request that you all join me tomorrow for a patrons only stream, right? A lot of turmoil and things and ups and downs have happened this year, but I am trying to rebuild my Patreon. And part of what I've, it's been crazy. I haven't been keeping up with the Patreon as much as I should, but tomorrow I am doing a patrons only stream, a stream for patrons only. And if you want to be included in that, all you have to do is sign up. And, the clock is ticking. If you can sign up in the next hour before midnight, you can be included in the patrons only stream that happens tomorrow. And if not, then you're going to have to wait a whole nother month, for a patrons only stream. So I would encourage you to sign up. It's the last minute. Go and sign up. Support my work on Patreon. Help me rebuild everything, and keep going on. Support my work. Support the community. We could use your support. And tomorrow, the patrons only streams that I do are very small and intimate. There's not many people on there. Might be more people this time, but usually there's only about 10 people on there, 12 people maybe. And we get on there, and I don't have any opening remarks, and I don't have any super chats, and I just answer people's questions the whole time. And I'm much more casual and open about what I say on those streams. People who were on the Patreon, they knew about the CPUSA drama that happened last year. They knew about that way ahead of time because they were plugged into the patrons only streams, and the people who were plugged in, they knew about the CPI community and all the things that are happening. They're much more intimate and close up and personal. About projects I'm working on, things like that. So if you want to be in the know, you want to be up close and personal with me, sign up on my Patreon, and it would be really, really great to have you. Really, really great to have you. And on that note, I'm going to start answering people's super chat. Oh, a Rumble rant came in. Thoughts on Moscow financial districts being droned recently? Well, very good. And since it's a Rumble rant, I am going to answer that one first. And thank you, Unknown. Thank you, Unknown, for the Rumble rant. And I would prefer, if you're going to ask questions, do it Rumble rant. You can do it Super Chat. You can do it however you want. But I'm going to answer the Rumble rant question. And it was from Unknown. He said, what do you think about the drone attacks on Moscow? And I have been highlighting that and sharing the videos of these drone attacks, right? It's horrendous. Could you imagine what the United States would do if there were drone attacks on New York City, on Wall Street, being carried out from Mexico? The USA would just demolish Mexico, right? I mean, what would the United States do if there were drone attacks in Washington, D.C. that were coming from Jamaica? The USA would demolish Jamaica, right? I mean, and Russia, they have secured the Donbass regions. They've secured Donetsk, Lugansk. They've secured Crimea a long time ago. You know, there's contention over Odessa. But at this point, you know, and this is what was revealed in Seymour Hersh's recent article, they're not leaving, right? These regions voted to join with Russia in popular referendums. The people there have been wanting Russia's protection for 8 years. The Ukraine war is pretty much over. Ukraine has no plan now. Their counteroffensive went. There is no counteroffensive. It was a joke. The war's over. The war's over, except Ukraine is not going to stop, right? They're just going to keep going. They have no game plan. And Seymour Hersh has revealed that the intelligence community has been saying to Biden, dude, like, there is no way for Ukraine to win at this point. What does win even mean? They're not going to get the Donetsk People's Republic back. They're not going to get Lugansk back. They're not going to get Crimea back. Russia does not want Kiev. Russia does not want to take over all of Ukraine. They don't want that at all. They want to protect the people who've been subject to bombing. And they're doing that. And it's secure. And so now the USA's plan, Biden and the United States, they don't want to just keep unloading weapons and money and all kinds of stuff. They just want to keep unloading that into Kiev so they can keep, you know, throwing bodies at Russia and throwing away people's lives and wasting money and ammunition. And, you know, we know for a fact that Zelensky and his oligarchical buddies are hoarding the money. It's criminal what they're doing. And it's like, at this point, there's no end game here, right? Imagine, okay, I support Russia. I think Russia's doing the right thing, right? They had to protect those people. That's what I think. But imagine you don't think that. Okay. Imagine you think Russia's bad. Russia, rah, they're bad. Imagine you think that. Okay. Well, what's the end game here? How does the killing stop? Right? I mean, at this point, the war is over, except the killing continues because one side is determined to just keep wasting everyone's money and wasting human lives. The war is over. The people of the Donetsk regions have spoken. That's it. That's a good question. And it's horrifying that there just can't be a negotiation. And it's utterly horrifying. It's horrifying and scary. And the fact that they're attacking the capital of Russia with drones. I mean, this is terrorist tactics, right? The murder of Vladimir Tatarsky. They talked about it at the UN today. I covered the UN meeting where they had a witness, a guy who was in a cafe and witnessed the bombing. You know, he felt like he had splinters in his face. You know, he felt a bomb go off, you know, and was, you know, I mean, he was in a cafe. And when a bomb went off and killed Vladimir Tatarsky, they have the guy, you know, who was part of that. And he just, you know, and I want to also bring something up, right? I mean, this is a side note, but it's like, so these people that have been recruited by Ukrainian intelligence, right? I don't know the details, but I'm just reading what I'm seeing in Russian media and all this. And it looks like what they do is they find people in Russia that are socially isolated, socially awkward, kind of lonely people in Russia, and they become their internet buddies. This is really shady. The Ukrainian intelligence becomes their internet buddies and then manipulates them into doing terrorist attacks against the Russian government, right? And apparently this bomb that attacked and killed Vladimir Tatarsky, the woman who brought the bomb there, it was like a bust of Vladimir Tatarsky, she brought to this cafe at this event that was honoring Vladimir Tatarsky. She didn't know that she was bringing a bomb that was going to kill him, and she almost died herself, right? That some internet people got buddy with her, made friends with her, and manipulated her into taking something that she didn't know was a bomb, or she didn't know exactly what was going on, manipulated her, and now she's been cooperating with the Russian government because she realizes these people that she thought were her friends on the internet were actually trying to kill her, would have happily killed her. And, that this is how the Ukrainian intelligence is working. They find people who have problems, people that are socially awkward, people who are socially isolated, and they buddy with them on the internet, and they're the only ones who understand you, and they make friends with them and all of that. And then they slowly manipulate them to do stuff. And folks, I heard the testimony before the UN about this, right? But this shit is happening all over the world. And this is something to watch out for, because I am seeing, obviously I don't know anyone who's doing any terrorist attacks, but I'm seeing this kind of manipulation go on everywhere. Everywhere I am seeing this kind of manipulation. I'm seeing it directly. Messages come to somebody, oh, I'm going to be buddy with somebody, right? Right. Sorry, I'll deal with that later. Yeah, I just got a message from somebody. I have to. All right. So, yeah, but this is a problem I'm seeing, right? Is that people that have an agenda, they find somebody on the internet who's just kind of isolated on the internet, and they buddy up to them and get them to do shit. And this happens. This happens, right? And I think a lot of the sinister, underhanded, manipulative behavior that we've seen in our corner of the internet and our corner of politics over the last year has involved this kind of behavior, right? It's involved Discord servers and voices on Discord, right? Discord is a nasty app because there's no record, right? The conversations are not recorded. You can't screenshot anything. And voices on Discord getting people to do things, right? And people on the internet claiming to be something, claiming to be the only person who really understands somebody, finding someone who's kind of socially awkward, someone who's not good at like in-person relationships, right? Has difficulty with in-person relationships and kind of building up their ego and being their buddy, and then turning them on their friends and getting them to do stuff, right? And this is a pattern that we have seen, right? And I'm not saying it's all the government. I think there's all kinds of different forces that do this, right? But it is a form of psychological manipulation. And we've seen that the Ukrainian Nazis are using this in Russia to try and carry out their assassinations, right? They're using, mysterious voices and people who pretend to be your friends on social media who you've never met. Look, I'll just be honest with all of you, right? Until I meet you in person, I don't really trust you, right? Now, obviously, there's people that have been around for a long time that have been very supportive of me and all of that. But until I meet you in person, I don't really trust you, right? And there have been people I've met in real life who turn out to not be trustworthy also. But they exist. They exist. And be wary of this, right? And especially if you enter our circles, right? If you enter our circles, it's very common that there are people, and I'm just telling you, there are very bad people who have nothing better to do than stalk CPI, right? And I have seen this so much, and I do not understand it for the life of me. I don't know. These people, I'm like, what do they have better to do with their time? I don't know. But if you're kind of well known in the CPI community, if you're known to be here, it's only a matter of time before somebody you don't know mysteriously messages you on social media and starts trying to be your friend, and then starts to try and turn you against me, and then starts to try and use you to get information on me and on the CPI. And I have seen this happen so many times over the past year, and it's creepy and it's weird, and it happens, right? And often they find like a side point of someone's ego, something the person's very proud of, something they disagree on. And that I have seen people who were big allies and friends of the CPI get turned against the CPI and then get used against the CPI because they have a buddy. They've got a friend on the internet who talks to them constantly, talks to them every day, and is just constantly talking to them and building up their ego, and then trying to nudge them to attack the CPI, and I mean, I have questions about what's going on here. I mean, is it just the government? Is these manipulative individuals? Is this the Cult Awareness Network and Steve Hassan? I mean, who exactly is doing this? And there's probably multiple different forces here. But I do know that in almost all of these cases where there's somebody who is kind of visible and prominent on the internet, who's part of the CPI, they get approached by somebody and it starts out with sucking up to them and being their buddy, and then it gradually turns into, oh, you're smarter than them. Oh, and it gradually turns into manipulating the person to do damage, right? And it's not simply a matter of turning them against our community, getting them to quit. No, it's about getting them to do damage. Right. And that shows that it's not honest, right? It's not like these people just disagree with the CPI and what we do. It's more about trying to inflict damage, right? And they tell the people, well, don't quit CPI, stay in CPI and voice record messages, stay in CPI and blah, 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 blah. Right. And it's very, very sinister, right? And we're on guard against this now. And we've trained our members to be aware of it. And we know it's going to happen. But it's something to be aware of, right? And when I look at these terrorist attacks, like the assassination of Vladimir Tatarsky in Russia, I notice that it looks like these Russians that they're recruiting and manipulating to work against their own country and work for the Ukrainian Nazi CIA terrorists, that they're doing a similar operation. And they probably have whole manuals about how to do this now. This is a new intelligence tactic, right? We're in a whole new world with information now. And they probably target specific personalities, right? They probably won't talk to everybody. They look for a certain type of person, and they know they've done all kinds of psychological research, and they've studied the person's behavior and the algorithms, and they know exactly how well to set this person off. And this is something you have to be aware of, right? And I'm warning you, if you're part of this community, you will probably get approached by these kind of crazy people, and I urge you to be careful. Right. And that these are manipulative people who seem like their only goal is to try and damage and prevent this community from growing and expanding. And that's what makes me think that there's something more evil going on, that it's not just people who disagree with us. Right. Because, again, there's people I disagree with. There's people I don't like. I try not to think about them. But these people, they seem obsessive. They document my every move. They report on every single thing I do exactly. So it's just something to be aware of. Something to be aware of. So there you go. There you go. Don't want to make everyone paranoid. I just want people to be aware. I've been observing this tactic. I've observed it, and it's very sinister. And that, again, until you meet someone in real life, you can't really trust them. And there's a lot of people on the internet who want to pretend to be your friend so they can use you for something. And that's something to be aware of. That's something to watch out for. All right, let's start answering super chats. Ukraine did to Moscow to Operation Doolittle in World War II. This is about the attacks. Look, I mean, again, what would be the response of the United States if Mexico was doing drone attacks on Washington, D.C., if Mexico was doing drone attacks on Wall Street? You know, I mean, it's pretty obvious that, yeah, I mean, you know, and the way that this is being glorified, I mean, they are attacking civilian areas. They are attacking people. They are sending people to blow up cafes full of people. I mean, the Ukraine is using terrorist tactics right now because they're losing the war, and they're just targeting civilians. They're trying to blow up bridges. Like, I mean, this is at this point, it's a terrorist operation. They're going into Russia and killing people and murdering people and trying to blow up bridges. And I mean, what more is there to say about it? All right. Hi, Caleb. Hope all is well. Would you mind speaking on why the USSR was one of the first countries to recognize the state of Israel? Well, the USSR could have prevented Israel from coming into existence, but they didn't. They voted for the creation of Israel at the UN Security Council. And that was because coming out of World War II, many people believed that Israel would be an anti-imperialist socialist state because so many Jews were progressive and because the Holocaust had been carried out by fascists. Many people believed that, and Israel marketed itself as it was like some kind of giant socialist commune in the desert, right? You know, the kibbutz movement. And it used to be that young people that were liberal and left wing would walk up and down the streets of Manhattan selling trees for Israel. That used to be a really common thing back in the day, is that people would walk up and down the streets of Manhattan and say, would you like to buy a tree in Israel? Would you like to buy a tree in Israel? Right? And sell a tree in Israel. And that was a really common thing. And it would be young, leftist, progressive people. It was considered a left-wing progressive cause to buy a tree in Israel. Right? And that used to be a thing that young people would do. And I mean, I heard that the Young Communist League, first they'd go out and sell the Daily Worker, then they'd go out and sell a bunch of trees in Israel. Right? And that Israel, you know, Jews in America were a left-wing, you know, group largely as a community. They really liked Roosevelt, and the Nazis were fascists. And there was a feeling that Israel would be a progressive left-wing socialist country. Well, it wasn't, you know, and Israel gradually had to shed the leftist and socialist skin, had to shed its leftist and socialist skin over the years. You know, they had to do it. But they did it over the years, and the way they did it was, you know, it took a long time because they're a right-wing settler authoritarian country, but they tried to present themselves as left-wing. And, you know, the settlements were presented as you know, as being socialist and progressive. There's a lot of stereotypes about Arabs as being backward and authoritarian, and, you know, and a lot of manipulation was done. And it was a huge mistake the Soviet Union made, and almost immediately they realized they were wrong. And you'll notice 1948 in Czechoslovakia, they executed a number of Israeli spies. And almost, you know, really quickly after Israel was created, Israel started accusing all the socialist and communist governments of being Nazi and fascist and anti-Semitic. And the newspapers were full of report, and it was pretty clear almost immediately that Israel was an outpost of Western colonialism and imperialism. But, you know, wasn't like that, you know, and they accused Stalin of anti-Semitism over the doctor's plot, and you know, all the socialist countries were finding Mossad and Israeli spies that were manipulating their politics. And, you know, I mean, Israeli manipulation and infiltration of the socialist bloc was going on, and Israel positioned itself as more and more anti-communist. And it was finally in 1967 that the Soviet Union recognized the Palestine Liberation Organization and withdrew recognition from Israel. But it took some time, you know, and then, you know, in the 70s and 80s, you know, the Soviet Union was backing and arming the Palestinians. And so, yeah, it's a wild history. There you go. All righty. Gonzalo Lira. Yeah, I saw that, you know, that he's been released. He's not being held by the Ukrainians, but people are worried about his safety, and he could be on trial. And yeah, I mean, that's a wild situation there. And again, this is just a guy he's just a blogger. He's just a journalist. You know what I mean? And they've treated him as an enemy of the state. And I mean, yeah, it's pretty wild. You know, I mean, he's just a journalist. He's just there reporting on the war. He has an anti-imperialist perspective. He's a libertarian of Argentine descent, from my understanding, and they've gone after him. There we go. Right? There we go. Yeah. How does one explain that Russia and China are anti-imperialists, whilst the U.S. and EU are imperialists, you mean, to a typical normie? Are globalists just imperialists for the right? I would explain that imperialism is a global system. It's a system where some countries are kept poor and kept underdeveloped at the expense of other countries. And that what Russia and China are doing with the countries they trade with is the opposite of imperialism. They're building them up. They're expanding. Their economies are growing. They're helping these countries to grow. They're partnering with them. And imperialism involves holding back economic development. Imperialism is a global financial system that is anti-growth. And that's the important thing to understand about imperialism, is that it is anti-growth. So there you go. There you go. Do you like Rage Against the Machine? The group, it was from the 90s, and they were still kind of doing things when I was young enough, when I was old enough to get into them, but I kind of missed them. I know there was the Battle of Los Angeles album, and there was what was their other albums? I don't even remember their other albums, but they had Renegades, I think, was another one of their albums, and and I heard that they were friendly with the Revolutionary Communist Party, the Bobavakian people. They promoted their group Refuse and Resist, which was like an activist group the Revolutionary Communist Party had set up that protested for Mumia Abu-Jamal and protested police brutality. There you go. I don't know. I never really, the music, some of their tracks are fun to listen to, Guerrilla Radio, and what are some of their other songs? Sleep Now in the Fire and all that. But, it's not really the type of music I enjoy. I'll just be honest. It's, it has a leftist edge to it. And I know Michael Moore made one of their music videos, and Tom Morello, I met him like several times at Occupy Wall Street and at other progressive left-wing kind of things. Tom Morello calls himself an anarchist, and his mother, I believe, was involved heavily in the struggle against apartheid and like black liberation movements on the African continent and such. And, I'm all about progressive left-wing music and stuff. I actually enjoyed Tom Morello when he was the Night Watchman and he did like the acoustic music. I really enjoyed that. The Road I Must Travel. I really enjoyed that song. And a lot of his stuff is the Night Watchman I really enjoyed more than I enjoyed Rage Against the Machine. So there you go. All right. In light of the situation in Ukraine, you think Poland will move into the west of the region? I sure hope not. Right? Because Poland, it's a very anti-Russian government, but it's got a nationalistic edge. And my hope is that Poland realizes, even though they hate Russia and they've really played up the anti-Soviet aspect of their politics, my hope is that they will not do that move, because that'll be really bad. A lot of Polish people will, and opening up a new front like that would be a disaster, right? And it wouldn't be good for Poland. Wouldn't be good for Ukrainians, wouldn't be good for Russia. It would be bad for everybody if that happened. I hope that Poland has the common sense to pull back. You know what I mean? The Polish government, it's kind of nationalistic, definitely anti-Russian, but I hope that they'll realize that if they move in like that, not a smart move. Not a smart move. All right. My YouTube feed consists of two things: communism and superheroes. If you had your druthers, what would the next Superman movie be like? I'll tell you what I would do. I would do a Superman movie that was set at the time the Superman comics, the originals, were published. It would be set in 1939. And Roosevelt would be president, and the Communist Party would be, a political factor. The Soviet Union and the United States would be, in the process of eventually aligning against the Nazis. And Superman would come into politics. It wouldn't be a modern world that he comes into politics in. He would come into the world in the 1940s, and you would get an understanding of Superman being part of the Popular Front. Because really, that's what Superman was. Superman wasn't a communist, right? Even though Stalin means man of steel. Superman represented kind of the ideals of the Popular Front. He was for labor unions. He was against racism. He was against fascism. He was for the workers. He was for the common people. He was for loving your country and wanting national unity. And Superman was a Rooseveltist. And the communists were a big part of the Roosevelt coalition, but they weren't the only part of it. And that I would make a movie where Superman comes into the, metropolis in the late 1930s and fights some fascist conspirators, and teams up with the Communist Party and the labor unions, and teams up with Roosevelt and fights the Ku Klux Klan and fights some Nazis, some Silver Legion of America, fights William Dudley Pelley and the Silver Legion of America, the mystical occult Nazis. That would be my version of Superman. I'd have Popular Front, William Z. Foster adjacent Superman. That's what I would have. I would have Superman teaming up with Roosevelt and Stalin to fight fascism and fight for the working class. And I would do a Superman set in the year that Superman comics came out with the politics, the optimism, the anti-fascism of the era. That's what I would do. If it was up to me, that is the way I would do it. And on that note, folks, I am going to end tonight's stream. It has been a pleasure. So I will say goodnight for now. Join me if you're a Patreon member, right? You still got 32 minutes. You can join the Patreon before midnight. And if you join it tomorrow night, you can join me for a patrons only stream. We'll be doing one tomorrow night. So there you go. There you go. In the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.